am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Erin Linehan. She is the Senior Vice President and Head of Global Functions Compliance at Raymond James. She is a frequent speaker at company and industry events, domestically and abroad. She is the National Co-Chair for Raymond James Women's Inclusion Network and sits on the RJ Compliance D&I Committee. Erin has received her BS from Cornell and JD Cum Laude from Tulane, and also holds the Series 7, 9, and 10 licenses. She serves in the following professional capacities as a member of SIFMA's Senior Investor Working Group, FINRA and SEC's Senior Investor Roundtable, the board for the FSDA, and the executive committee of the PACE Center for Girls, Inc. She founded and led Southeast Women in Financial Services, which fosters networking, professional development, the advancement of women in financial services, and philanthropic efforts to support financial education, professional development, and economic security for women through community partnerships, education, and advocacy. During our discussion, Erin shares her journey from how she started in law and the lack of women that she saw as she went up her own career journey. This drove her to create a network of women leaders to help break down barriers and open up more opportunities for women. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I'm here with Erin Linehan. And Erin, do you want to give a little brief intro on yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Amy. And hi to everybody. My name is Erin Linehan. I am Senior Vice President and Head of Global Functions Compliance at Raymond James Financial. I'm also the National Co-Chair for the Raymond James Women Inclusion Network. And I also co-founded and I'm the co-chair of an organization called Southeastern Women in Financial Services, which is a grassroots organization of female lawyers in the Southeast that practice in financial services. And I'm also sit on the board for PACE Center for Girls in Hillsborough County.
Oh, wow. So real commitment to women in the workplace.
100%, for sure.
Well, great. Well, I'm so glad that you could be with me today on this episode, and would love to kind of start from the beginning. So, I mean, obviously you're very accomplished and involved, but we always like to know how you got to where you are. So where did you grow up? What was your background? Just give us a little beginnings of Erin.
Okay, so I grew up on Long Island in a town called Amityville, which most folks are familiar with from the movies and the books. So I grew up around the corner from the horror house, if that's your next question.
Okay.
I went on to Cornell University after that. And then after that, I went to law school at Tulane. After I graduated Tulane, I moved to the Tampa Bay area and practiced with two different big Florida firms for about 5 years. And then I went over to Raymond James in 2004. I was a litigator with Raymond James for 13 years, I think. I stopped litigating in 2017, about 13 years. At that point, I had taken over a team for dispute resolution to handle client complaints. And I began building a team to handle the protection of our senior and at-risk clients, which was a new initiative for the firm. Moved over to compliance. Those teams began to be an enterprise function. So those teams began serving the entire enterprise, including abroad. And so that was fun and is fun. And then about a year ago, I started building our marketing and compliance and corporate functions groups. So that's
all right.
So finally came up with a name because of Global Functions Compliance, because I used to just be head of dispute resolution, senior notice clients, marketing compliance, and corporate functions compliance, and nobody liked it.
Yeah, that is a very long name.
Yes.
So as far as starting out in Long Island, so what kind of hobbies did you have as a child? What were your interests? What did you like to do?
I played soccer
Okay.
and I swam. We swam, my family swam and played soccer from a young age. And I did that all the way through graduating high school. I was a violinist also.
I swam and played violin too.
Yes, I think I remember that from the first time I heard you speak.
Yeah.
I played violin, which unfortunately I did not continue when I graduated high school, but there was a period of time in high school where I believed I should go to a conservatory. I don't think anyone else believed it. I wasn't that good, but I think my parents were like, I think you're going to have to take it a little bit more seriously if that's the plan. And then what other interests might I have had? That was, largely what I was focused on back then.
So what did your parents do?
So they were educators for a long time. My mom was an educator her whole career when she wasn't at home, and she was at home until I was in second grade. And then my dad left teaching to become a financial planner. So the industry I'm presently in. When I was in about
so is that
grade.
how you first got exposed to it?
A little bit. Interestingly enough, my sister was in financial services. Her husband is in financial services. My brother's a lawyer also, and he does some financial services work. I have a couple uncles that were in it. So probably it is a piece of who I am. But how I ended up at Raymond James was, I think, how a lot of times young lawyers switch jobs is they didn't like their bonus one day and got on what was known at that time as monster.com. And I posted a resume, and 5 months later got a phone call about it. I was no longer upset about my bonus, which when I look back, it was probably $300 different than what I thought I deserved, but it was real money to me.
Exactly.
And so 5 months later, I was actually in Australia visiting a friend, and I was at the Sydney airport coming back, and I was checking my messages for the first time because you didn't have cell phones that had international. I wasn't checking emails. The world was very different in 2004. And I had, I think, 4 messages from Raymond James that they had left over the course of the 2 weeks I was gone.
Oh, no.
And like the last one was like, if you're not interested in the job, you could at least call us back. I sent you my resume 5 months ago.
Who would have known that would have been the right way to go about it? Yeah.
Yeah. And within 2 weeks, I had accepted the job and was moving on. So it was originally thought to be a 2 or 3 year stint for me. I thought I'd go learn this different, unique practice, and that I'd probably go back into big law, or my old boss and I used to say that, I'll learn this and then we'll open a boutique firm and do this work. And once a year we have lunch, and he said, yeah, it was, that's 16 years ago. Are you ever coming back? It's not looking good for you.
That's funny. So you played violin and were really into it.
Yeah.
And thinking you would be a musician. So what kind of, what got you into becoming an attorney in the first place? Like where did you start in college, going from high school? So
I started in college as, they called it natural resources at Cornell, but it was basically environmental science.
Okay.
I had this image of myself as like a Greenpeace warrior. Mm-hmm. But I really wasn't necessarily even behaving like one. That was like who at 17 or 18 years old I thought I should be, perhaps.
And why did you think that?
I care about the environment by all means, but it was probably more of a hobby than what I saw as a career. And so I was sitting in Cornell has like all these amazing, and you do a lot of your field work on their property. They have lots of different forests and woods. I'm sitting in some woods, and second day of collecting salamanders and marking them, and, and someone turns to me and they're like, Erin, what's your plan? Like, I guess they saw the like some of the students like, what do you want to do? And I was like, yeah, it's not this. It's not this. I like to camp. I like the outdoors. But it's not this. So I started, I signed up for some kind of like the general ed classes at Cornell. I took a business law class.
So who asked you that question? Not that
honestly, I don't remember. It wasn't like a good friend. It was like another student in the class.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Who took
like someone
note
kind of
the fact
stops
that
you in your tracks of like, they
And that was
noticed.
that was the moment where I was like, this is not where I see myself. Like, this is not it. And so I took a business law class with a professor called Dale Grossman. I still remember her name. And I loved the class. I loved her. Like, immediately asked her to be my advisor. And it just started, at that point, really started focusing on the fact that I thought I'd love law school. I wasn't sure what I would do with it, but I thought that it would be something I'd find interesting. I thought that I was going to be a transactional lawyer. And as I think a lot of young lawyers do, or law students, they envision themselves as being these international, transactional business deal person. It seems super sexy, work travel and all that. And I ended up working for a firm who I really liked the firm. And for me, it mattered less what I was going to be doing. And I started doing real estate litigation was my first job. What I learned when I went to Raymond James and started having a lot of work travel is it's horrible. Who would want to do it? I think that is, a young person's aspiration because, and I think other work travel is maybe more interesting, but the kind of work travel I got to do, is a lot of times in conference rooms and hotel rooms, not a lot of the fun stuff. So. A lot of.
You're usually pretty
delays.
isolated. You're just flying somewhere else to go work.
Yeah, I mean, there was one period of time where I woke up and had to grab the notepad on the desk because I had no idea where I was. I'd been so many different places. I was like, oh, I'm in Memphis. What am I doing here?
I've gone to the wrong hotel room before. I've been to the number I was at the last hotel. Oh wait.
Yeah. It's not. It is. Not a good time.
Yeah. So did you do any kind of work, when you switched over to law school, to know that you would like it, or
work outside of classes?
The coursework that
I continued to take, law classes at Cornell.
Okay.
And became basically a business major. They call it something at Cornell. I was in the ag school. Cornell has 7 different colleges, and a couple of them are state funded. And so they have, they're called land grant. And so I had started in the land grant school because that's where the natural resources program was. So stayed in it. And so my major at the time was called agricultural economics. And then I think by my senior year, they had changed it to agricultural resource managerial economics. So it went from ag to Army. I never took an agricultural class. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's kind of was the nature of the school. So
right, yeah. So was there a time that you missed playing violin?
Yeah, there's been numerous times in the last, how many years now? 25, 28 years that I've missed it. I tried out for the orchestra my sophomore year at Cornell, and literally never went to look to see if I made it because I thought was so horrible in the audition. I didn't even think it was worth, because I hadn't been playing in a year and a half. And, I was like, I'm just going to do this because I think I should do it. And then I was like, that's not even worth a walk back to see if I made the orchestra. With, my son has asked what's that? It's my violin. And I was in the beginning of the pandemic, he's like, let's take it out. And we took it out. And a string had popped, and he said, can we order a string? And so we ordered the string, and we still haven't taken the next steps. But I'd like to. It's always, when I find the time, or make the time, really, everyone could find the time to take lessons again. But I think I always fear picking it up because I think it'll make me very sad.
Yeah.
How much I've lost.
Well, violin's tough because I had to pick it up a couple years ago for one of the concerts I was doing because they found out I had played violin. Mm-hmm. And when you're not practicing violin every day, when you're younger, it's not like guitar where there's frets.
Right. Like there's this one song that I competed with in high school, and I still think to myself, could I just pick it up with my fingers? And I could play the song by heart. I played it thousands of times, and I can still hear it in my head to this day. And I think if I picked it up and couldn't make my fingers work, I think it would just be too heart-wrenching for me. So I'd rather just assume I could, rather than know that I can't. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely, I think it's one of those things to when something's so personal, like that was one thing that I walked away from picking it up again. It was like that's a really personal thing that I can't be bad at because it was something I had put so many hours in, but I can pick up a new instrument like bass guitar and not give a crap, like, cause it's,
that's the thing. I was like, I'd love to learn to play the guitar or to, get better at the piano, but revisiting the violin, I 100% agree with you. Like, it's so personal to me. And the fact that I let it go is just one of, I think, a great loss to me.
Do you listen to any classical music or?
Not as much as I used to. I do. A friend of mine from orchestra in high school, she has continued on to become a professional musician. And so her type of music she plays, she calls chamber soul. And so I listen to a lot of her music, which is her cello, and she sings.
Oh, wow.
And it's a keyboard. It's really, really cool. Her name is Shauna Tucker. You can follow her on social media or otherwise. But so that's, I think, like the strings music I do listen to is her. And so, and I have a lot of admiration for it. And it brings me back to a day when we played together for years and years and years. Whenever she said, I'm going to come and do a concert down in Tampa, but you have to perform. I was like, I need a lot of notice. I need a lot of notice if you're going to ask me to perform with you.
Well, and I just find that point an interesting kind of pivot point because, so just going back to that story of that you wanted to go to school for music and your parents saying, well, if you're going to do that, this is what you have to do. So why did you make the decision to not work harder at it?
It was a couple different things. It's kind of like that. It's a life. It kind of goes down to the not taking the path of the natural resources, right? Like it was going to be a bigger lifestyle decision, both from like when that becomes your job. So I was certainly much more like competent and passionate about it probably than I was about I'm going to go be a Greenpeace person. I've been playing for, a long time. But, my dad had real concerns about the ability to make real money, the chances of even if you committed, in a way that you're not there yet. And I was practicing a fair amount, but not go to Juilliard amount. And, that would I'd be able to make a living as a professional musician. And I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be able to. So
yeah, the power of those words are so important because someone could have said the exact opposite thing and you've been like, well, maybe I can, and I think, and then it was, I think there's a generational difference because, that definitely happened with me. I went into accounting, where I was kind of in music and art and wanted to go more into the art space. And it was the same thing that was said to me of, you won't make as much money, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that I've been hyper conscious of as a parent because of that, mindset that was in my head. But one thing I realized was like, accounting never came easy to me. Like, it was one of those things that I had to work double as hard as everyone else because it just didn't make sense to me. Like the debits and credits were in opposite directions as far as I could tell. so
it's not like you phone it in becoming a lawyer and an accountant. It's the same it's just different hard work.
And you get, if you're not a hard worker or committed, you don't have a career either. Like, So that was one thing that I was thinking is like, with my own kids of if you're passionate about something, you'll work hard at it. And, and you can't always worry about the outcome because like, I feel like, like even your path has gone in different pivots of where you thought, and you kind of have to allow someone to just, could they be passionate enough and work hard enough? And if they don't work hard enough, they're going to learn their lesson,
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. My son right now, you do the whole first day of school. What do you want to be when you grow up? YouTuber. We want to be a YouTuber. So I was like, what does that even mean? He's like, I'm not sure, but I think it's what people do. And it gets him to play a lot of Xbox. I'm like, So I'm not sure how fully I'm going to support more Xbox time to pursue his dreams.
But I have heard that there are professional teams on this and coaches.
Yes, they really are. I just went for a morning walk, and so we're talking about it, and I said, okay. I was like, well, what do you think goes into being a YouTuber? Like, happy to support it, but I think you're going to, he's like, well, you can hack and do these glitches. It's like, okay, then you probably need to learn how to code. I was like, so let's think about getting you a coding class. And he's like,
now it's work. Yeah.
Videos, learn how to edit videos, you know.
But I do think too, like I went through the same decision process with music because I was in an orchestra for the city. And I mean, I had two things happen is one, I played violin and I would audition for this symphony here. And the conductor just hated me. I mean, he would just make these eyes. Like he just didn't like me. And so one year we were at the symphony and watching the Cincinnati Symphony. And we were sitting there and my mom turned to me and said, well, what about viola? I'm like, oh, no, I don't play viola. I play violin. She's like, well, what about it though? And then I'm like thinking about it through the whole concert. I'm like, I'd be a really good viola player. So I tried out with viola the next year and got in.
Really?
And he was like, that's your instrument. I was like, well, shoot. But I got in. I got, the goal of getting in. But with that symphony, one concert a year, you would play with the professional orchestra. So your, standmate was from the orchestra and so forth. And I remember like my junior year kind of looking around going, this would be my office. This would be, it's not, a hobby anymore when your hobby becomes work. And that's really kind of a decision of like where you want your hobbies to be and where you want your work to be.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Whenever I have, through the different organizations I'm involved with, meetings with people who like run nonprofits and do all this amazing work. I was just on one the other day and I was like, oh, like what an amazing job that is.
Yeah.
But, and they're doing such great work, but at the end of the day, work is still going to be work. Right. So I'm sure they have crappy days like I do,
Right. And political stuff and all that. So let's get into that a little bit. So you have a lot of outside organizations that you work with and volunteer internally. Mm-hmm. So what has kind of started that passion, especially around women, I'm guessing, since some of these organizations are women organizations?
So, I found throughout my career that, both when I was at the firms, and that was also one of the reasons, I was ready to move on to Raymond James, but also when I got to Raymond James, I didn't have much to look up to. There weren't, I think at the firms I used to work for, my thought was these women were either successful at work and it looked like they were, I think, less successful personally, or they had a robust family or personal life and were viewed as not successful at the office. And I thought like there was nobody's life I really admired there. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the reasons that made moving over to Raymond James easy. When I got to Raymond James in 2004, is a very different place than it is now. I found I had a similar abyss of lack of women in senior leadership roles in 2004 and, women to look up to. And so after many years of kind of feeling such a gap there and such a gap of like a tribe, in conversations with women who were similarly situated, but not say at Raymond James, who either worked at firms who did this work or worked at other broker dealers, and we'd see each other at industry conferences or other times we worked together, we started talking about, could we be our own people to look up to? Could we have our own network? And that's in 2016 with a woman named Andrea Green, who is at Bressler Amory in Birmingham. She and I founded Swifts. And that was the basis was like, there's not enough of us around. We need to be able to make sure we take care of each other. So, we did that as a true grassroots organization, and we're now at about 150 members throughout the Southeast. And so we want to build a tribe to fill the abyss that we were all feeling kind of within our own firms or within our own world. And I think after a couple of years of building that, Raymond James saw what I was doing, noted my passion in this space. And then this spring, they had asked me to become national co-chair of WIN. I always laugh because, this spring I got promoted and became national co-chair of WIN. I said, apparently all I needed to do was start working in my dining room and everything was going to come together. But I think a piece of it was, I was talking to a friend of mine in HR at Raymond James, it kind of a little pouty about, why is no one ever asking me to be involved with WIN? And I wasn't going to anything. When I first started at Raymond James, I went to a WIN event. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel like it spoke to me. So, in 2004, I was done. I wrote it off, right? And kind of, went a different direction. So as time passed, I was like, I'm so in this space. Why is no one ever asking me to be part of things? And my friend turned to me, she's like, well, does anyone know? This is a non-Raymond James organization you're running. And granted, there's Raymond James members, but does anybody know? And I was like, I don't know. Start telling people. And so I, realized and, the importance of self-promotion and started having those conversations and making sure people understood what I was doing and where my passions were. So, and that's, I think, what developed.
And I think that's a really important, especially for women, because a lot of times I think women look at that stuff as political or egotistical or whatever. So how did you go about letting people know that this was an interest and these are things that you do? Because we do have to speak up. If we're, everyone notices themselves, they're not seeking to see what someone else is doing.
Right. So I would say one piece of it is I became pretty active on social media with what I was doing through LinkedIn. And we have some folks at the company and in the industry. I mean, many people rely on LinkedIn a lot. So I started talking about it more. And candidly, I just got over myself and scheduled meetings with people and basically said, I want to talk to you about about this piece or about this part of my life you may not know, to see how we could work together or how I could add value to what you're doing. And I just began those conversations. And then, I think those individuals started paying more attention to what I was posting on social media and what I was passionate about and what I was doing. And it kind of just spiraled from there pretty quickly. Once, I just gave a spiel to my team last week on, it's review time. And I always say, don't ever think your manager knows everything you've done. I made that mistake once. I got a raise that I thought was subpar. I went to my manager and I said, how could I possibly get this raise? And he said, well, it's what everybody got. I was like, well, I'm not everybody. And here's why I'm not everybody. And he's like, oh, okay. And he went and got me more money. And I thought, I'm never going to not have my manager know everything when they go into budgets. So, so from there, I became very comfortable with the year-end process of just vomiting everything into that review. So then I try and pick but I think for women, the self-promotion is uncomfortable. We talk about it a lot. Swifts has been talking about self-promotion for so long, as being something we really need to get over and start doing. And it's one of the first things, when, young women or young associates at all come and talk to me about and trying to pick my brain. I said, do not be shy about making sure people know what you're doing, what you're interested in, and what you've succeeded in. And network as much as you can to tell as many people as possible, because no one knows if you don't tell them. Don't assume that they know. Don't assume the person above you is telling people what you're doing. And don't let them control the narrative. Control your own narrative.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to call out an elephant in the room, which I do when I speak at women's conferences about this topic, that at least in my experience, women are not good at helping other women. So we create these organizations, we talk about these issues, but actually putting into practice of a women leader seeking opportunities for other women, a woman that works for a woman leader, not tearing that woman leader down because they feel that spot's now taken, so they won't have an opportunity. What have you actually seen in practice that has worked to have women help women?
Like I said, when I wasn't sure about the women's group at Raymond James, but I felt I had a need for something, I started kind of organizing these lunches of a bunch of different women at the company. And And we were talking about, oh, let's make sure we include this person, or let's make sure we include that person. And to your point, someone said, oh, I really would prefer not to include her. I'm like, that's not what's going to happen here. Like, this is inclusive, not exclusive. Like, I don't want to be part of that. Like, that's
Right.
not what we're trying to accomplish here. I will tell you then, that particular woman started scheduling lunches and not including me. Like, at the same time as the lunches that I was putting together. And I was like, I can't win. Like, this is so frustrating.
No, but this is exactly it, right?
Yeah. So, what I try to do, kind of similar with when you think about where we are in our race and social justice issue about, making sure these microaggressions, I've always tried to say, like, I don't really think that's productive for women. I don't really think that's what we should be doing. I mean, the last thing you want is for the stereotype of women having cat fights to be actually proven anywhere.
Right.
The change in dynamic at Raymond James with the many women who are now in VP and SVP and on the operation committee and on the executive committee, I'm sure it's going on. I don't feel it like I used to. I think things have gotten a little bit different. I had a bunch of women over my house for dinner in February, and we were so excited we were going to do it quarterly, and now not so much. And Jody Perry, who's the president of one of our broker dealers, and she was there, and there's a bunch of Raymond James women, and she says, it's so nice to be at a place where I look around this room, and they're not all my close friends, and they're my colleagues, and most I've worked with, but not all of them. I don't think there's a person in this room who would stab me in the back. And if anyone in this room wanted my help for anything, I'd help them. And so I think there is a pretty supportive vibe amongst the women at Raymond James. And I think that's because we're just getting to a place where there's a lot of us to help each other out. Mm-hmm. And I always stand by the messaging is, don't be alone in that elevator, bring more people on the elevator that you ride up, or when you get to the top, you go back down and you get more. So, and I think there's a lot of women who are doing that at the company now. I'm not going to be so foolish as to believe we don't have the elephant in the room.
What do you think shifted that?
I think because there was more women in leadership, so there was no longer this fear that the spots for women's growth were limited. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of it, for sure, that the hiring and promoting of women became more common, more commonplace, and that there were women at the very top that made it feel less like we were all scrambling for a piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. Right? It's it
didn't seem scarce.
Right. It's equality is not pie, right? What's that expression? It's like, just because they want more doesn't mean there's less for you. It's not pie.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that really helped. I also saw, even like within Swifts, I had known allegorically there's some issues amongst some of these women at some of these different firms, and I've seen that as the relationships have been built, go away. And now women at different firms who, might compete for Raymond James business or other broker-dealer business, referring each other work. I mean, that was, we had to cancel our spring symposium in May, and we just kind of had like a virtual happy hour, and it would have been our fifth conference. And I said, what, does anyone have like a great Swift story? And a couple different women talked about the referral of work between two competing firms. One woman said, I had a hearing I couldn't cover. I got, caught up in a scheduling conflict, and I knew I could call another member of Swift's at a different firm who would then make the money off of it, and that they would take care of it well, and the client would be satisfied. And I thought to myself, that is exactly what I was trying to promote. You call it a woman, even though they're at a different firm, rather than somebody else. So I think we just need to keep thinking about it and being intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it does go to show, like, having these associations help to just keep it forefront and build those relationships. Also, you kind of feel like you're in a silo because many women don't think to network. That they go in to work hard and think, like you said, like, why aren't people noticing my work and that sort of thing, where men spend a lot more time on the networking.
Yes. And I've had a big switch on that in the last year as well. I was sitting with a friend of mine having lunch at work like a year and a half ago, and we were talking about how she had gotten passed up for this job, and I was like, I just don't understand it. And she says, no, if, he was always here having coffee with somebody. And she's like, I wasn't having coffee. I was doing the work, and I was like, the women are busy doing the work because they have, so much else to do at home that they can't take the break to network, because that's a half an hour that might cost them time with their kid or grocery shopping or, the other things they have to do. So they want to do the work. And so you have to, so they can get that done to do all the other responsibilities. And it's also a little more uncomfortable for women, whereas it comes very naturally, I think, for men to network, and that, people hire people they have relationships with. They know what their interests might be. I wasn't doing that. Now, many more people, I feel like I talk all the time now about, what I'm interested in, what I want to do, how I can partner with folks. My work's become much more satisfying, and it's more enjoyable. And I feel like you start to develop the rhythm and the recognition and the work you want to be doing. But I treat it as part of my job as opposed to something extra I'm doing that's taking away from personal time. But it's, I have, make sure you meet with X amount of people this month, and who are folks you're touching base with. And I try and be more like deliberate about it, particularly virtually, because you're not making the connections in the cafeteria or in the hallway. So you have to, think about, who haven't I seen? Who haven't I spoken to in a while? Who haven't I had a meeting with in a while? Have I done something interesting that I want to make sure this person knows? It's not, it takes time.
Right.
To put time into it. But once I started doing it, I felt like it made a real difference in my career.
So how many of those reach outs do you do a month?
I would say 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of like plan for like 1 or 2 a week.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. When I got a new executive assistant a few months ago and gave her access to my calendar, I kept thinking, oh my God, Nicole's going to say, do you just sit around and have coffee? Coffee and ketchup.
Yeah, but then those are really important for future whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I try and have like a new person, like 1 or 2 new people a month, and then maintenance on other relationships for the other kind of, 3 or 4 coffees.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I think people assume in corporate it's different than like an entrepreneur has to be out networking and making new contacts for new business. It's kind of the same it's internal sales, right?
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
And you can't think that you don't need to build those relationships for other things. So I think that's a great exercise and something for people to really tangible that they can do, even if it's just once a week. But
yeah, and when I was litigating, my relationships kind of developed quickly. I was traveling with folks.
Right.
We were traveling together. We were flights delayed together. We're getting a dinner in the hotel. And I had very strong relationships amongst the businesses I represented, which was mainly our private client group and our retail business, the 2 broker dealers. When I started moving into managing dispute resolution and senior at-risk clients, and then, more broadly into compliance at an enterprise level, I didn't really have relationships at this company I'd been in for 13 years outside of, and by all means, PCG is the largest business Raymond James has, but outside of, other support, support pieces to PCG, operations or IT or any of that, because I had just organically grown the other relationships, and I realized I had, missed an opportunity and had to catch up.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'd like to end with some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category, family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Family and friends.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask you 4 questions. So in the category of family and friends, things or actions that I don't have that I want.
So I don't think I'm unique to right now, but what I don't have is the ability to be with family and friends more right now, and hug them. Like the physical contact piece. You've lost the ability to squeeze a friend. And I think hugs are so many great endorphins. As a result, I think my son has gotten the grunt of that because I can't stop squeezing him. But he loves it. So I feel like he's okay with it.
Oh, that's good. All right. Things or actions I do have that I want.
I have an amazing tribe of women friends, either from work, from college, from organizations I'm involved with, high school, within my family. Lots of strong, motivated, caring women. They challenge me, they inspire me, they support me, and they most importantly they make me laugh.
That's awesome. Things or actions I don't have that I don't want.
I think to buttress off the last answer, I'm not interested in surface relationships. They don't, obviously, from a personal standpoint, just people to go out with or people you feel like you should be friends with. I'm 46 years old. I don't need that anymore. I think the last 4 years have shown where people's values are in a lot of different places. And what I've realized is I don't want to invest my time with people whose values I don't share. And so we're all so busy. So I don't have toxic relationships, and I'm glad to not.
Yeah. It's funny how we kind of change our perspective as we get older, right?
Yes, for sure.
Things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
This is also pandemic related. And I would say that right now I have physical distance between me and my mom. And so she is kind of a snowbird that lives about a mile down the street with me. And she came down in March, and then we kept her hostage. We wouldn't let her fly back to New York. And so we were with her every day for 5 months. And then my son and I, we rented an RV and we drove her home because she needed to get home, which we were so lucky we did, because we got home and then her sister passed away unexpectedly. So my mom was able to, because we did that, she was able to see her sister before she passed. But then we came back down without her. And so we all knew we needed space. All three of us agreed it was a lot of together time, but to know that this I didn't want space indefinitely.
Yeah.
So I don't care for that. I'm a mom is my best pal.
That's hard stuff. Yeah. So you've shared a lot of great tips, but is there anything you want to make sure that you want people to walk away with from our conversation today?
So I would say, kind of like in my experiences, is like one thing is to not be afraid of failure. When I've made that job change over to compliance, and when that happened, and when they asked me to do that, I got real nervous about stop being a litigator, and I felt like who I was. But really, what it was I was a successful litigator, and I was scared. What if I wasn't as successful as a manager or building compliance programs? And that's turned out to be like an epic decision in my career that really changed the path of things. So don't be afraid of failure. Don't be scared to ask for feedback. I think feedback is the greatest gift you can get. I felt like I had been banging on the door in my job for a long time, just banging on a promotion that I could not get that door to open. I saw feedback that I finally got as someone giving me the key, and then acting on it was how I got it unlocked. And without that, I think I would have continued to have felt that I wasn't getting where I thought I needed to be. And don't ever estimate the power or the effect you can have on other people by leading by example, by helping somebody else. Whenever someone asks me for help, I think that request, if they think I can offer advice and guidance that means something to them, that's a blessing, and they always deserve my time. So walking the walk, not just talking the talk, and giving people your time to help them. You get a lot out of that. That person gets a lot out of it. Kim Jensen over at Raymond James, she always says, even when I mentor people, they're always mentoring me too. And maybe they don't know it, but it's always a shared experience. So you can help people and you can change people, and that power is something everyone has, and helping somebody else is the greatest satisfaction I have.
Well, that's awesome. Well, you've definitely demonstrated that with all the different organizations you're involved with and started and lead. So thanks for making your impact for women in your field. But I want to thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it.
And now for a Mindful Moments segment of this interview with Erin Linehan. And during this interview, we talked a lot about the pivots in Erin's journey from starting in music, going into environmental sciences, and eventually into law. And I think no matter what age you are, it's important to see if the work that you're doing or the goals that you have are still in alignment with who you are, because we do shift and change over time. who we are as a child, what we might have imagined as the things that we want to do. And sometimes we get stuck in a rut without actually opening our eyes to see what's really working for us. And her pivots in her life and just keeping her eyes open to what opportunities are out there was really important to finding the right positions and work to align with who she was and what she wanted to accomplish. The other thing that we talked about was as she was going through her journey as a woman in leadership and creating success, that there was a gap in having a tribe of women that she could network with or look up to or actually have the right professional and personal mix that she could relate to, that understood the demands of having children and balancing work life as well. So it's important that we figure out how we go about doing that. And in Erin's life, she actually went and created an organization, a membership association in the Southeast, so that more women could start interacting and networking with one another. And one of the other big areas that she noted that has helped her over time, that a lot of times this ends up with women that we don't always toot our own horns or let people know what we're doing. And we just assume that people do know, is that she realized as an inhibitor that people didn't really know the things she was accomplishing and doing. So some of the areas that she talked about that I think are important lessons to bring out is first that she became active on social media. When we become active on social media, it's really important that we understand the message that we want to put out in the world and that we are consistent with that message, because if we are not consistent with that message, people don't believe us. But if we are consistent with that message, people start asking us questions or relating to us in a different way. So even if we're in a corporation, it doesn't mean that we still don't have to do the work of really putting ourselves out there and letting people know what is important to us, what resonates with us, and how we want to align our work with the things that we do. She also had a really important point about scheduling meetings with people and asking how they could work together. A lot of times when we think about networking, we think about it from a sales point of view, but not necessarily as our coworkers or people from other departments or even competitor companies and so forth, of where you can get to know one another, see the common areas that you might be able to help one another, so that you never know when things come up and you can call upon someone else. The third tip that she brought up around this was making sure that in your year-end evaluation that you tell everything you've done, not downplay it, not leave out certain things here and there. And it may be a good course of action to keep notes on those things throughout the year, because a lot of times what happens is by the time you get to an end of year review, you forget some of the things that you did and so forth. So just keeping a spreadsheet or a document, keeping all of that updated throughout the year can really help you with making sure that you're telling everything you've done throughout the year. Now, the other thing that I think was a very important point and awareness is that things are starting to shift with a lot of women because of these associations and networks and all the learning and education that goes around to help women support women and women get the support that they need in order to be able to rise to different positions. And when we start understanding that we aren't alone and that we can work together, it can change everything so that it doesn't look like there's scarcity of women in leadership positions, that we are more open to helping one another so that we can actually change the paradigm. Now, when she talked about networking with people, that she had a whole process of making sure that you track the number of people that you want to meet with each month, How many people are new people you've never met before, or people that you want to follow up with and keep up with as well? This is really important in understanding that, and also knowing and documenting after those networking meetings what the follow-ups are and when you want to get back with them again. This is no different than sales in a way of just creating that network that's going to help and support you. So some of the takeaways that she had was, first, to not be afraid of failure, that change is okay, that a lot of times when we take on new positions or putting ourselves up for a new position, that we don't necessarily have the skill set yet. And it's okay to be learning as you go through the process. The other thing that she said was to not be scared to ask for feedback, that acting on that feedback is how she unlocked many of her promotions. And so rather than looking at the feedback as negative, how can you utilize that so that you can actually use it in the right way and be able to improve yourself so that you can achieve the goals that you want? Another tip that she said was not to estimate the help that you can provide to other people, and that mentorship is a shared experience. That it's important as we go into collaboration and networking relationships that we define what that should look like and what we want out of it and what the mentee wants out of it, so that we make sure that everyone walks away feeling like it was successful. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.